couple of things inspired me. I would say the first one was meeting some homeless veterans in Southern California, and was overwhelmed by six people at the time that were living in a warehouse that was owned by a veteran who allowed them to stay in this warehouse, sleep in this warehouse. And so I was overwhelmed that these people who actually fought for us, for my freedoms, were living in an environment where they had nothing. And then I was also inspired by my Wikipedia page, because I went on my Wikipedia page and I read about what my legacy was, and they basically quoted my legacy as being the man that took officials out of white knickers and put them in black pants, which is true, but it's not exactly something that you want your legacy to be. And I think I double dipped on those and all of a sudden thought, what am I doing? I was working in the WAC, and it was actually 1995. I was working a game in Laramie, Wyoming. And I didn't know this at the time, but the NFL was sending one of their scouts to go see someone on my crew, a field judge on my crew. And so I didn't know that. I had no idea that they even had a scout there to see this official. And then he came back to Denver, because you drove back into Laramie and then back. And lo and behold, the NFL had a crew at the hotel also, and Jerry Seaman was there. And the scout came on Sunday morning to see him, and Jerry asked him what he thought about this side judge or whatever it was. And he said, well, I wasn't that impressed with him, but the referee was really good. And that was me. And his name was Pereira. And he said, and I don't know if he's on your list, but if he is, then you should look strongly into that. Well, I was on the list. I even think you can teach courage. Some people disagree with me from that, but I think courage, to me, comes through with confidence. When you build a person's confidence and he becomes comfortable, again with these C words, with his subject matter, then I think his courage gets stronger. Because, as I said to these young people at this Protect the Game thing I was at, all these people that are yelling at you, remember one thing. The ones that yell the loudest know the least.
And now, episode 26, letter X, X Factor. Join hosts Dana Pappas and Nate Acosta with special guest Mike Pereira on the From A to Zebra podcast.
Welcome back to the From A to Zebra podcast. I'm Dana Pappas, here with my co-host Nate Acosta. On this episode, we are bringing you a guest who might look and sound familiar to our audience, regardless of your tie-in with the officiating community.
This episode will cover a topic that officials and future officials will not want to miss. If you have ever watched a game in any sport and wondered how the officials got to that level, today's guest will talk to us about the X factor in officiating.
Our guest today is that face, the one that pops onto your screen occasionally when you watch football on Sundays. And he's also the former vice president of officiating for the NFL. He's the founders of Battlefields to Ballfields. And he, most importantly to me, he is a dear friend and a true ambassador of the officiating community, and someone I've had the honor of knowing, and I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but for over 20 years. Mike Pereira, welcome to the show, my friend.
Dana, it is great to be here. You know, I was thinking about this show and thinking about how long I've known you. And I was also thinking about the fact that I first got involved in officiating in 1971. So when you calculate the years, you think about, 71, 29 years till 2000, then throw another 54 years I've been involved in officiating, which just boggles my mind, because in 54 years, I've never grown tired of it. And I've been involved in so many different facets of it, but it's just been an incredible run.
So 54 years, you started in officiating when you were like, 3 or 4? I'm trying to do the math. I figured you were a child prodigy.
Well, I won't say my age then, but actually I was a junior in college when I first officiated my first game in East Palo Alto, California, which at the time was known as a very rough rough area, and I worked my first Pop Warner game. Didn't know what I was doing. The kids didn't know what they were doing. The parents had no idea about anything, and yet for some reason that was the beginning of a long, 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 long run.
It's amazing.
That is. And so, Mike, just you talk about that long run. Can you kind of give us, past that starting point, what led you to your now role as a rules analyst for Fox on Sundays, but, kind of give us your officiating journey.
Nate, it's interesting, because it's been a long journey and so many people have been a part of that journey. And that's true, I think, in a lot of people's, trek in officiating, how different people get you involved and help you move along. But to me, I had a dad who officiated, and so that was big. And when I first started in Pop Warner, I really wasn't interested, quite frankly. I mean, when a guy called me, the guy was a timer at San Jose State University and knew my dad and called me when I was a junior and said, "Do you want to officiate football?" And I said, "Hell no, I don't want to officiate football. I have no interest whatsoever." And he goes, "Why?" I said, "Because I don't. I mean, I just don't. I don't have any desire to." And then, he said, "Your dad." Well, yeah, okay, maybe that's why. Because I saw him getting yelled at all the time. I don't want to be yelled at. And then he hooked me, and he hooked me with the offer. It was like an NIL for officiating. He said, "We'll give you $10 a game, and you can work 3 games, and you can make $30 on a Sunday." And I'm like, at Santa Clara, I hardly had enough money to buy a 6-pack of beer, and I'm thinking, $30 cash? I'm in, gosh darn it. I'm ready to go. I borrowed my dad's old broadcloth button-down shirt. I had long hair, Nate, that stuck out under my hat. I was the most pathetic-looking official that anybody could see. When we talk about X Factor, you would say, well, you'd never fit, for God's sakes, in the X Factor. But I went and did this game, and I just don't know what it was. Midway through the first half, I'm running around that field, and it was like somebody injected me, a doctor injected me right into my arm with adrenaline. And I knew then that I had found my calling. I mean, this is 1971, but the passion that I built for it, that first moment, answered a lot of questions as to what I was going to do with my life. And so I went and joined the high school association and worked high school football, and never made it to the number 1 list. I'm not even sure I made it to the number 2 list. I think it was number 3, and I was a line of scrimmage official. But I just can't deny the fact that I had a dad who had officiated in the small college, junior college area where I was, and it helped me get to that level. And then when I worked junior college football, then I did get into small college around here in Sacramento, UC Davis, Sac State back in those days, and then to the Big West, and then to the WAC, which is where I was before I went into the NFL. Then I went into the NFL, and I went in there. 96 was my first year, and I had been working in the WAC for 5 years, and their commissioner, another person, Carl Benson, he had wanted me to become their supervisor of officials. And so I said, well, I can't because I'm getting in the NFL. Well, can you do both? He said. And I thought, yeah, I think I can. Most people thought I couldn't, but I thought that I could. And so for a 2-year period, I was the supervisor of the Western Athletic Conference along with officiating in the league. Carl Benson took a chance on me. Well, what happened was timing. The NFL decided to expand their supervisory staff. And so after 1 year, after 1996, when they first started this, I was on the list of 15 people. And I was literally like, why in the hell am I on this list? I mean, I've only officiated 1 year in the league, and they're asking me questions like, well, what do you think the owners think about the officiating in the NFL? And I'm like, I have no idea what the owners think about anything. But going through this whole process, they went to the WAC and interviewed coaches and talked to people in the WAC as to how I did as their supervisor of officials. And lo and behold, after my first year in 96, it led to an offer from the league to step off the field and go into the office, which I turned down for a number of reasons. Number one was I'd just been married for a year and they want me to leave and move from Sacramento to New York. Are you kidding me? And number two, I had a little small business with my mom and dad who were divorced working with me, and they hated each other. So I was practicing my verbal judo skills, keeping my mom and dad away from each other. And so I turned them down. And at that point, the headhunter, so to speak, called me and said, "What the hell are you doing?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, how about if we give you one more year on the field, and then you can get your parents situated." And I thought, the NFL's going to wait for me for one more year, hold a job for a year. I mean, at that point I had to say, are you kidding me? And so I said yes. So I worked the year, and I'll tell you one funny story, and then we'll move on. But when I became head of officiating in 2001, I got the keys to the building, baby. And I went into the personnel files. I can say this now because I don't work for them anymore. But I went into the personnel file and pulled out my file, and I saw all the reports of all the 15 people that they interviewed for this position. And so I read mine, and I immediately called on the phone and called the head hunter, the guy that was responsible. I said, "You are a jerk. I mean, you are a big jerk." And he's like going, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "I just read my report that you wrote about me, and you are a jerk. You're an ass. I mean," and he goes, "What? I told them that you would be the person to eventually take over the department." I said, "I know, but I read all your reports. Ed Hockley is an attorney in Arizona. It will take $500,000 to get Ed Hockley. Mike Carey sells ski accessories out of San Diego. Take at least $400,000 to get Mike Carey. Mike Pereira sells T-shirts in Sacramento. Won't take much to get them." And so I said, "You cost me. I mean, my God, you were." But anyways, thus led to the 12 years in the office in the league and working closely with the networks and even more closely with Fox than anybody. When I decided to move back west, they said, "No, you weren't going to retire." They called me that day that it was announced that I was retiring. He said, "We're going to come up with something for you." And I remember David Hill, the head of Fox Sports at the time, saying, "I talked to your wife. She doesn't want you home full time." And so lo and behold, I've had this job with them now for 15 years, which is amazing. I always thought, I don't like the word retirement. Transition is my favorite word when it comes to thinking about, what you do work-wise and what you do with your life, transitioning into something else. And I always thought I would transition into something where I could work 6 months, have 6 months on, 6 months off, and do it for 6 years, and then literally rent a car and drive the entire Route 66. That was my plan. Now it's 15 years gone by, and I'm still at it. At least I think I'm still at it.
This is a little off subject, but it's crazy to think that rules analyst job kind of opened the door for, I think, sports in general. I mean, currently, in women's basketball, we're using push to talk, as officials. The NBA uses push to talk. But that's, I think the fans really enjoyed having you explain what was happening, the behind the scenes type stuff. And so it's almost changed the game for all sports. And I think you were probably the first to do it.
Yeah, I was the first. And I agree with you. I think all the fans that aren't on social media like it. The ones that are on social media don't seem to like it because they just rip you all the time, no matter what decision you make. But yeah, I think it's because, I was the first, and I've said at least to all our football guys, my pocket does not have a zipper on it, and if you want to slip something in there as a little percentage of your income, because I created this job, feel free. But at least football guys, they have zippers on their pockets. And so nothing has managed to come my way at this point, but I am proud I mean, I am proud that it could have gone south. I mean, it could have gone the other way. I could have failed at this. And I think had I failed being the first one, then I think it might have been difficult going beyond that, for everybody else or for the networks to think whether or not there was any value. So I do take pride in it. And I do look back and think of, where we were before this role started and how hidden we were as officials and how really much more open that we are now. And I think we're partly responsible for that.
And you have to give it up to Fox, because when we talk now, we're going to talk about X Factor and the It Factor. You were it. For it to be successful, they needed somebody that had that X Factor, somebody that was going to be able to pull it off and make it successful. Because I don't know that had they had anybody else, I mean, that it would have been as successful as it's been.
Well, to me, the It Factor or the X Factor, we have talked about it so much, but we always relate it to officiating. Well, it's so beyond officiating. I mean, the X Factor, and of course I always call it the It Factor. The it is such a vague word. I mean, what is it? What is it? It's like it's hard to really kind of grasp around that word. But to me, I think of why I got the job at Fox. I kind of just used the letter C to start the things I think about, and I think of what Fox saw in me. And I did ask them, and they hit upon two quick C's. They hit upon comfort, that they felt I was very comfortable in front of a group, which then related to them how I would be, national television, even though there weren't maybe like 126 million people, you don't see them. You're just looking basically at a camera or something. But I was always very comfortable dealing with the Fox people. And then confidence. They saw I had a lot of confidence. And because I was willing to, to take on the Troy Aikmans of the world, who used to just pound the hell out of me in the seminars with Fox. And we would have some of the greatest arguments. And then we would end up hugging, which led to their most important point really was communication. That I had the ability to communicate in short, simple bursts and to make my point clearly and make it brief. And they looked at that and that all fit into what they thought they would be looking for, even though this was a new role and they weren't even sure how they were going to use me. It's all part of being, and we can go on and we'll talk a little bit more about the It Factor, but it's everywhere. I mean, and it's immediate. I mean, the thing with the It Factor, I mean, I just spent some time in Colorado Springs with Protect the Game people, and they were training veterans to become baseball umpires. I saw it in the first 5 minutes, the group of 7 people. I saw it in the first 5 minutes who had it and who didn't. And it was amazing to see. And it was over something simple. They had everybody rise up and stand up. And it's the first one I'd been to, and I didn't know what they were doing. And all of a sudden, the clinician, the first thing that Brenda said was, out. And everybody went, out. And then she said, strike. And you're watching these 7, and they had to shout out and give the proper signal. You look at it and say, that guy's got it. And then you went like, wow, she's got it. I mean, you could just see it from comportment, the way that you handle yourself, the way that you look, which is all the things that I tried to look for, when I was in the NFL. And, it's really pretty amazing.
I agree, Mike. And I think, in my years working with officials, you're exactly right. You can tell when someone has it within moments of watching them work. And I think of a couple of times that's happened to me. Recently, I was also at a Protect the Game in Albuquerque, and there was an 11-year-old there with his dad, I believe he was 12 years old. And this kid, I didn't even see him work, but just his confidence, the way he carried himself, I was like, I need to keep an eye on this kid because he had it. And then a couple of years ago, I was at a officiating clinic in Westfield High School, and they're showing kids how to blow the whistle and the signal to make for basketball. And this one kid just caught my eye, and I ran over to him. I go, how long have you been officiating? He goes, this is the first time I've ever blown a whistle. And I was like, no way, because he was just this confidence. And I was like, you need to stick with this. He's like, you saw me blow the whistle once. I go, it doesn't matter. And then the other time, and I'm going to get personal here, there's a person on this podcast with me, and Nate Acosta, seeing him work for the first time at a basketball camp in Tucson about 100 years ago. Didn't know Nate, had no idea who this dude was, but I saw him working, and I told him, I was like, you have it, and you're going to be a Division I basketball referee. And I think he thought I was crazy or delusional or something. I don't think he believed me very much. So fast forward, and he's got a pretty good Division I basketball career going. So it's one of those things where, as administrators, we know it, but I'm still not sure that it's something that can really be taught or trained. So, Mike, in your opinion, is there anything that an official can do to develop this X factor or this it?
I think there is. I mean, I think it's hard to say. It's hard to say anything to say to some official, you need the it factor, but you can't get it. You can't get it. So I think there's certain parts of it you can, in communication, helping people learn how to communicate properly, which we need to do, in all sports. To piggyback on what you said, I remember I went to I'm not so sure if it was SMU or TCU with Gerald Austin to a spring game when he was running Conference USA. And I asked him, what are you looking for when he's watching this group of 12 officials working this scrimmage? And he said, I don't know. And you don't know. I said, well, that's a real strong answer. And I said, to me, I am not looking for a guy that calls let's see, if we're in a basketball game, I'm not looking for a prospective official, and I'm not looking to see how he judges block charge. I mean, I'm not going to do that. In football, guy calls a hold, I don't care if he's right or wrong. The guy calls pass interference in a scrimmage. Do I want to jump on and say, I don't want this guy because he was wrong? Those are teachable aspects. And the ones that are harder are the communication, and the confidence and the courage. I mean, it's, and I even think you can teach courage. Some people disagree with me from that, but I think courage, to me, comes through with confidence. When you build a person's confidence and he becomes comfortable, again, with these C words, with his subject matter, I mean, then I think his courage gets stronger. Because, as I said to these young people at this Protect the Game thing I was at, all these people that are yelling at you, remember one thing. The ones that yell the loudest know the least. And so you're better than them. And so you cannot let them get the better of you. And as you build people up, then I think there are certain things that you can help develop. Because if you tell any human being anything about whether it's, we stay with the it factor, if you tell them this is what we're looking for, I don't care on what you do and call in a block charger, but I want to see how you do it. That's what I want to see, how you do it. And here's some people that really did it well. If you're a football guy, think about a Gene Steratore. What has he got? That makes him look like he's got the it factor? Gene Steratore didn't have the best record in calling fouls, but if you lined him up with the rest of the referees, who are they going to pick? Gene Steratore, because he has that strength, because he has that confidence. And I think people do learn how to emulate others. It's hard to teach somebody, I guess. It's hard to teach them what it is by words, but it's easier to teach them by having them watch people that have it. So we can't give up and say we can't teach it, but God, it is so important. It is so important.
Well, and I think that courage can be taught. I agree with you on that, because I think courage also comes with the confidence in your coordinators, in you, knowing that you're going to make those mistakes and you're going to face challenges that, are going to deflate your courage. But when you have coordinators and you have supervisors that understand that and come back and have these teachable moments with you when you make those mistakes, that builds courage, because now you start to learn that you're not afraid to make decisions in crucial situations. And so your courage and your confidence starts to build. And with that confidence, you tend to get more plays right.
Yeah. And
absolutely, I agree with you.
yeah. And you're right. And then the other thing is, when you first start out in officiating, you're kind of overwhelmed, right? I mean, I don't care what sport it is, you're kind of overwhelmed. But what really builds confidence and what really builds courage are successes. And we're finicky in this avocation of ours. We tend to focus more on our failures than we do our successes. Mm-hmm. And, success, even small successes, are so key to confidence and courage. I just got over a long bout with a very serious back surgery. And at one point, I was at such a low point that I wasn't even sure that I wanted to go on with life as I knew it before it had disappeared. And I didn't want to necessarily live the life that was facing me. But I had a couple of successes, you know what? A success of walking 20 yards without a walker on your own after the surgery is like that. If focusing on that made me think I can do it. And then, a fact of taking a shower on my own without having to sit on a stool was like a great success. And that really built me up to where I could have a great recovery. And I think it's the same way in officiating. If we would spend more time as officials, as coordinators, as supervisors, whatever, focusing on the successes as opposed to the failures, you build those things that you need.
I think, Mike, when you're talking about not only your officiating journey, but what you went through with your back, because I remember kind of every step of that when you were going through it, because you have that X factor or that it factor, that's why you couldn't fail, be it as the supervisor of officials for the NFL or for the WAC, or getting up and walking 20 yards without your walker. That part of you, that intestinal fortitude, that whatever it is that makes you wired the way that you're wired, that's why you haven't failed in any of those regards. So I think there's so much of officiating that's just bigger than that. It transcends officiating. It goes right into real life. And you've been kind of a walking testament of that. So hearing your perspective about that from both your officiating life and then with your health battle, that was a great way to bring it home and just illustrate, when you have it, and it's in every part of your life. So I appreciate you sharing that.
And when you have it, and I would say this too, and there's nothing more special than the officiating community. I mean, I haven't had the healthiest life, since about age 25. I've had my ups and downs. And in my downs, it was always my officiating fraternity that was behind me. It really was. And that's why, too, I try to preach to people to stay with it, get over these first 3 years, get through it, because your best friends are going to end up those that are blowing the whistle. And it was so true with me, and even carried over when I went through the back thing with Fox. I mean, with Fox, they've realized the importance of what we're doing, what we did with officiating, and basically bringing some positive focus on that they were with me every step of the way, and because they've realized how important it is. And luckily, they got a younger, better-looking guy named Blandino that's a backup for me, so they were never stuck without one. But then again, even though they weren't, they never left my side. The network left my side, and I'm extremely thankful for them. But that's I guess that's why, Dana and Nate, that I've been involved in officiating for 54 years, huh?
Mike, we hear all the time that, especially in officiating, opportunities happen when you're in the right place, right time. How much of that is actual luck, and how much of that is actually, that official's X factor or the it factor?
I think it depends where you are in your officiating journey. I mean, there's not a lot of luck in signing up to become an official. I mean, here in Sacramento, we can sign up 30 people to become football officials next season, and they'll all show up for the first meeting. And then 18 of them will probably not show up for the second meeting. And so we can sign them up, but, then it becomes a process of getting the right mentor and getting just to the level where you can work further up in high school to the varsity games, and even on beyond that. Look, luck is a major portion of it. I mean, because you're gonna most likely not move up, by somebody that you talk to, in terms of, you're gonna most likely move up by someone that saw you, that sees you work. I mean, and to me, it was like, I remember before I got in the NFL, I was working in the WAC, and it was actually 1995. I was working a game in Laramie, Wyoming. And I didn't know this at the time, but the NFL was sending one of their scouts to go see someone on my crew, a field judge on my crew. And so I didn't know that. I had no idea that they even had a scout there to see this official. And then he came back to Denver, because you drove back into Laramie and then back. And lo and behold, the NFL had a crew at the hotel also, and Jerry Seaman was there. And the scout came on Sunday morning to see him, and Jerry asked him what he thought about this side judge or whatever it was. And he said, well, I wasn't that impressed with him, but the referee was really good. And that was me. And his name was Pereira. And he said, and I don't know if he's on your list, but if he is, then you should look strongly into that. Well, I was on the list, and they hadn't sent Alabama Glass. That was the guy's name, Bama Glass, Alabama Glass. They had sent him. And then when they said that, he said that to Jerry. Jerry went and looked at the list, and lo and behold, I was in the next year. So it's more likely somebody that sees you work, that will move you on. And obviously, we all know too that it gets harder and harder to move to the next level, which is why I always try to say, just enjoy the level that you're working at. Give it your best, and don't focus as much moving up. Let it be known that you have a desire, and hopefully find a mentor, but let it happen. Don't force it to happen, because if you do, if you try to force it to happen, it probably won't. I mean, I remember back in my WAC days, I used to get application after application. This is terrible, but I'll say it anyways. Do you know, when people sent me applications, I would read them. I'd read the application and read what they had done, levels that they had worked. I would read them. If a picture came with it, I would throw it away. It was like they sent me a picture like they were trying to sell their looks, and I wouldn't even read it. I mean, and that's probably bizarre. And I hope, Nate, that you didn't send, maybe you sent your picture every time you sent an application. I don't know. But it was kind of, if somebody's tried to sell himself based on his picture, I didn't, go file 13, get the thank you letter, appreciate it. But it's obviously, it's very, very difficult to move up. And so you just have to work as hard as you can and hope you get seen. And if you get seen, and that pushes somebody to get a hold of you to move you to the next level, you got a hell of a lot better chance than somebody calling some guy and saying, hey, you might want to look at John Dokes here. He's good. Well, that carries less than being seen by someone.
And I do have my photo on my resume.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah.
I figured.
I mean, I'm sure Tom Brady has his photo on his resume.
He doesn't need a photo.
Okay.
He's Tom Brady. I mean, let's be real.
He's Tom Brady.
But Mike, everything that you're saying is just so accurate, because it doesn't matter if you're in our world or my world, if you're a middle school official and you're trying to get into varsity, you never know who's watching you, and you never know. It can be the most random game. You do not know what kind of opportunity you can, pardon my language, but piss away because of something that you did that was, you were lazy in a game. You don't know the eyes that are going to be on you.
That's
and I think that it's so critical that people understand that. Like in your case, they weren't even looking at you, but they found you instead of the guy that they went to look at in the first place. So I think when officials get into this, they have to remember if their desire is to move up to whatever their ultimate level is, everything's an audition. Like you're always being watched, and that sounds probably creepier than I meant it to be, but people are looking at you, and you have to make sure that your comportment is good, your professionalism is good, the way you're communicating with coaches is good. All of that has to look good. I mean, I remember I would go to games sometimes and I'd see officials who just weren't hustling. And that's probably the only time I would actually ever call and say something to them. And they would go, well, I didn't know you were there. And I'm like, why does it matter if I'm okay? First of all, wrong answer. Yeah. Secondly, like, why wouldn't you be hustling all the time? I think the worst was when they said, well, it was just a girls' JV game, Dana. My head almost detached from my body in that moment, but that's okay. But I think that people need to understand that you're always being watched, and getting to that next level, whatever it is, you got to work hard at every game.
Years ago, Dana, I was at our seminar, Fox seminar down in LA, and Jay Glazer's kid was playing soccer or something. So he's going to take me to see his kid playing soccer. So Jay Glazer, who's the Fox's insider, he's got cell phones in each ear, and so we're walking, parked the car, walking to some field where his kid was playing. All of a sudden, there's a kid's game, and I'm watching, and there's two soccer officials that had it. They had it. I mean, their uniform, their shorts and their shirt looked great. They were moving around. Their posture was great. They're giving it all to these 11-year-olds or 10 that are playing. And I was just like, this is the coolest thing. So in between periods, I went to them. I actually did. I walked up to these two guys and said, hey, I just want you to know that I really appreciate what you're doing. You're doing, you guys look great. The way you move on the field, your hustling is great. That everything about you is positive about officiating. And I just want you to know that I really appreciate it. And the guy looks at me and he goes, no speaking English. And so all my goodwill was down the tubes. The guy didn't understand one word that I told him. I turned around and said, okay, well, shook their hand and said, see ya. But
well, at least you put it out in the universe. I mean, it was still, the gesture was good.
They felt the love, the energy. They got the energy.
They could tell you were friendly. It was good.
Yeah.
So, Mike, a little bit off topic, but I'm going to try to find a way to connect the two. As most of the world knows, I think you are the founder of Battlefields to Ballfields, which I'm wearing the shirt today in your honor.
I saw.
We recently just talked about B2B on an episode earlier this season. So talking about this, what inspired you to create the organization in the first place, and which qualities do military veterans and active military members have that are really part of that X factor?
Yeah, well, a couple of things inspired me. I would say the first one was meeting some homeless veterans in Southern California, and was overwhelmed by six people at the time that were living in a warehouse that was owned by a veteran who allowed them to stay in this warehouse, sleep in this warehouse. And so I was overwhelmed that these people who actually fought for us, for my freedoms, were living in an environment where they had nothing. And then I was also inspired by my Wikipedia page, because I went on my Wikipedia page and I read about what my legacy was, and they basically quoted my legacy as being the man that took officials out of white knickers and put them in black pants, which is true, but it's not exactly something that you want your legacy to be. And I think I double dipped on those, and all of a sudden thought, what am I doing? What am I doing in my life to make some aspect of something, of some part of our society better than it was when I first got into it? And I thought, okay, telling media side, trying to teach somebody what's a completed pass or an incomplete pass in the big picture means nothing. I mean, what is getting people out of people that shouldn't have been out of white knickers in the pants? Nothing. That means nothing. And then I drive to Oregon every year by myself, radio off, no noise, and listen. I just like to listen what rolls around in my head. And after seeing those veterans, I thought, is there anything I can do when you consider the shortage of officials to kind of help the veterans and help officiating? So I came on this idea, I'm thinking about veterans, courage, confidence, mission, teamwork. And I'm driving up I'm headed north, and I'm thinking, why didn't I think of this before? Because it has part of that it factor that you're always looking for. And so then I kept driving, and then I stop at the same, I leave Sacramento with a full tank of gas, and I stop at the same town, on the same road, the same Chevron station, in a town called Weed, which was more appropriate to me when I was younger in my college days, if I was in a town from Weed, named Weed. But I was actually pumping gas. And I thought to myself, what could I call this? If I could figure out how to recruit veterans and pay for veterans to become officials. And it just came to me, Battlefields to Ballfields, from the battlefield to the ball field, vets to refs, which is the other one I was thinking of after that. Battlefields to Ballfields was first. And then I kept driving, and I got to Oregon, to my friend's place in Sun River, and I started telling he and his friends, and they thought it was a great idea. I went back to Fox, told them what it was. They were, anytime you say to like Fox, I think I'm going to start my own foundation. The guy gave me you and everybody else. What's yours? And I told him, and then he was like, "Wow, that's really cool because it connects the dots between veterans, kids, and community." And so, so that was my motivation. That was my motivation to start this thing. And along with the fact that I feel like, and now we've given over 1,700 scholarships, and in 38 different states, we've had scholarship recipients, and I feel like I've accomplished something. Have I accomplished it? Have I accomplished enough? No. There's much more work to be done. Time becomes an issue, and the amount of time I have to devote to it becomes limited, but the opportunity's there. And, and Dana, in your role and on our board, I'm so thankful for that. And I just think that over the course of time, especially when I decide to give up the media gig, which is coming pretty darn soon, I can confidently say I have worked my last Super Bowl, that's for sure, because we don't have another one for 4 years. So I guarantee you I'm not going to make it 4 years, but I'm looking forward to the new challenges. And that's why I was inspired going to Colorado Springs by this organization, Mount Carmel Veterans Service Center, and what they do to the veterans, what they offer the veterans in Colorado Springs is awesome, is absolutely awesome. And they're going to put Battlefields to Ballfields as one of their career opportunities in their program. So that's why I felt that the veterans had so much of the it factor already. And then if we can add on to the teaching side of it, that we could, and we've changed some lives. Dana can tell you that. We have changed some lives. We have had some vets that have PTSD who we could never cure that. But we have them now officiating multiple sports, and it's kind of like, it's kind of like a distraction, so to speak, but it's not we have one guy in the Rochester, New York, who really pretty severe PTSD, and he's now working 4 sports. He's working 4 sports, got a new job, he got married, and he credits it all to officiating.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, so that's the love of my life right now, quite frankly.
I love that. And I love the work that B2B does. It's such a great organization to be a part of. Having our podcast about the veterans the other day, it was great to see that there's so many people who are wanting to work in this space, because all of us, I think, understand what veterans and active military give to all of us, and to have organizations like B2B. And then we also had Protect the Game was on, which you talked about earlier, and Vets to Refs. And wanting for all of us to work together, because the more of us that are in this space, the more veterans we can help. And I think that that's just super exciting. But it's so, I just wanted everybody to kind of hear the story of where it started, how it's evolved, and the fact that all it took was a drive to Oregon to inspire you to think of it, because it's just, can't imagine what the officiating space would be like now without B2B. So hats off to you for that, my friend.
Thank you, my dear. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. So I wanted to ask, do you know the veterans that you had spoken to in that warehouse? Do you know anything that happened to them after you had met them, or were they just gone?
Thomas Harris
Was he one of them?
He was one of the
Oh
first
my
ones that I
gosh.
met who was really struggling. And so Thomas got involved and worked. I remember Thomas. I went to a high school game that he had in LA. And this was the other thing with the veterans that I thought would lead to their success is that when I went to, it was maybe his first game, I don't know, down in LA, he's running around like a chicken with his head cut off. I mean, and so I went up to him and said, Thomas, this is how you want to move on a running play. You move like this and think about your angles, go down the sideline in. And it was like, holy mackerel, he picked it up like that. And you think about veterans, well, guess what? I guess they're used to taking orders, right? And they're used to executing what they're told to do. And that was like a really wide open thing, eye-opening thing for me. And then there's my other guy, Hector Tarango. Hector Tarango was really, he was not one of the six, not one of my six originals, but Hector Tarango was another guy who had struggled with PTSD, and I got him to a camp in LA, and the poor guy was so nervous, and he just had zero confidence. And same thing with him. First play, he didn't even move. Then they told him, move down the sideline. Next play, right down the sideline. Next play, they said, now after the play's over, cut in, run it at a 90-degree angle. Down the sideline, 90-degree angle. Then he stood there. Next play, they said, okay, now you got to signal something at the end of the play. Hold your hand up. And so he did that perfectly. And then they had said before, pass interference. They said pass interference. They're teaching these people that never, ever officiated before. Well, offensive pass interference is this. And I'm going, why are they teaching? Why are they talking to these people? They're not. They throw a long pass in the corner of the end zone, and old Hector ran his butt down there and got close, and all of a sudden throws the damn flag and calls offensive pass interference. And it was the best call, and his mentor on the sideline that they had assigned to him ran down and grabbed him and said what a beautiful call that was. And I ran over from the other side of the field, and Hector's been another unbelievable success stories. But it is part of why they can become so good.
Absolutely.
Mike, you kind of alluded to this, and you kind of, I got excited with the last things you said about kind of your mission, and this is why you're doing the things. But on our podcast, we try to educate, elevate, and excite our listeners. What can you tell our listeners about officiating that's going to accomplish this mission?
I'll tell you, the best man at my wedding was a referee that I didn't know before I started officiating. I mean, you will not believe the social aspect that actually does come from this. And it's confined to a group, though, that shares your frustrations. And that's, you sit down and have a beer with people who've been through exactly what you've been through. And I think that's the coolest thing in the world. And then, as I said to this group, Protect the Game people, think of this. Although there is all this negative talk about officiating, just think about the fact, and these were all service members, and it wasn't, you don't have to be on the battlefield to get into our program, just serving, period. I said to them, much like the military, 99 and 5/10 of the population of this country does not have the guts to do what you're doing. They don't have the guts to do it. You're putting your ass on the line when everybody else around you won't. And so I think everybody likes to feel, I know I did and still do, everybody kind of likes to feel unique once in a while. That you do something that other people don't do. That you do something that when people actually stop to listen to what you do, they're mesmerized because they've never really talked to one. And I said that uniqueness brings you a lot of joy, and it brings you a lot of pride. It brings you a lot of fulfillment. Get up and speak in front of a Rotary group. You speak to a Rotary group, and maybe some of those same guys and women out there are the ones that were claiming that the NFL officials were accepting money from the Hunt family to carry the Chiefs all the way to the Super Bowl. The people that have no concept, don't have any understanding, and then when you finish, 55 people go, I didn't know that. And that's our world. That is our world, that people don't know that. They don't know what we do. They don't know what goes in it. And I spoke to a SIR group. I don't know if you've heard of SIR, Sons in Retirement. So it started out with guys that had retired, and this group got formed, SIR, Sons in Retirement. And then they said, well, anybody over 55, And so I went to Santa Rosa on Thursday, the day before I went to Colorado Springs, and they had 120 guys in there. And the first question I got was related to the Chiefs, which was fun because, you can actually resent it because it's so idiotic, or you can change the dialogue. And by the time I was done, those 120 people who realized that the decisions we make in real time that we are, and of course I use and to me it's accurate, 150 plays in the NFL, everybody thinks, oh my God, you only have one decision to make. What? You have a minimum of 10 decisions per. So I said, if you multiply every play 150 times 10, you got 1,500 decisions in the course of a game in real time, and you are going to make mistakes, probably 6 a game out of 1,500. And then you tell them, get on your phone and calculate for me the percentage of accuracy. I forgot these guys were so old, they didn't even carry a phone, for God's sakes. These are all retired guys. But the point was made, and I think I did. I changed the mindset of those people, and that's pure joy in my mind and something that we can all do. So it's not just calling balls and strikes. It's not just calling block charges. It's not just calling pass interference. Seeing the big picture and teaching the big picture and telling these same people that are negative all the time, telling them about, if we don't have officials, we don't have a game. And at first they go, ah, ha, ha. And then they go, oh, you're right. We don't. So teaching the masses out there as much as you can, it's just all part of the enjoyment of being involved in it. And it's not easy. It is not easy. It is difficult. And it takes a couple years to get through it. But when you do, there's nothing better. And again, my 2 things I always say is that those that scream the loudest know the least. And then 99.5%, it's obviously higher than that, but 99.5% of the people in this country don't have the guts to do what you're going to do. And that makes you unique. And I think I've been unique. I think that Dana her uniqueness is unbelievable. Nate and Ed, it's even rather unique that you could corral Dana. That's even the uniqueness of that. Being able to do that is incredible. That took, I'm sure, a special skill. But, that uniqueness is pretty damn special.
Mike Pereira, a couple of things that I learned today that I didn't know. First of all, I can't believe it's been 15 years that you've been on Fox. That just blew my mind a little bit. But what I didn't know is that the reason you became the vice president of officiating for the NFL is because you were like at a bargain basement price. I did not realize that.
T-shirts. That was one thing. I had an embroidery business selling corporate identity products, for God's sake. And the guy writes that in my report. I couldn't believe he wrote that. Guy named Joe Bailey. I'm going to expose him nationally.
I love it. That's what we're all about.
He's a good friend of mine, actually. But yeah,
that was my favorite thing. I had never heard that story, so that was incredible. I enjoyed that.
But you know what? I'll give you what is it? What was his name? The rest of the story. What was his name?
And the rest of the story. Who was that?
Harvey. What was his name?
Paul Harvey.
Paul Harvey.
Yeah,
I was.
And now for the rest of the story.
Now we know.
I went back to my personnel file, and it was gone. I think the bigwigs heard about this, and my file was no longer in the file with everybody else.
That was shredded shortly after. Thank you, Mike. Mike Pereira, thank you so much for joining us on the From A to Zebra podcast. What a great conversation. And more importantly than that, thank you for everything you do for officiating. Thank you for everything you've done for me over the years. You're a great ambassador for officiating and just a better human being and an amazing friend. So thank you for your time today. And we enjoyed having you on the podcast.
Well, it was very, very, very enjoyable for me.
Excellent.
I just wanted to echo what Dana said, and thank you, Mike, for always being a part of us. And, I know that the time you joked about me riding Dana's coattail, it's that I'm still doing that. Still riding coattails, but I appreciate that everything you have done for not only her, but for us. And so for our listeners, thank you for joining us on the From A to Zebra podcast. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and X for more information about the show. Until next time.
Be sure to hit that like button, follow, subscribe, and also catch From A to Zebra on Instagram at from_A_2_zebra, Facebook From A to Zebra podcast, and on X at From A to Zebra.